Hey guys, welcome to Panic at the Podcast. We are your hosts, Michaela.
And I'm Megan.
And welcome to episode 3.
I don't know why I said it like that.
I don't know. Welcome to episode 3 of Panic at the Podcast. Today we have a crazy story. When I first found out about this case, mind blown.
Yeah.
Honestly, you will not, if you've never heard of this case and you listen to this whole podcast, you're not going to know where it's going. Like, no idea.
No, it's just insane. I don't have any other words.
No, there are no other words. But we're going to be talking about a case that comes out of somewhere pretty close to me. Well, our main character, if you will, is from a little old place called Chack Bay, Louisiana, which is about 30 miles from where I was born and raised. So,
and is the only place in Louisiana that is said exactly how it's spelled.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. You're not wrong. But yeah, we are going to be talking today about DeeDee Blanchard and DeeDee and DeeDee and Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Crazy story. So let's just jump on in, I guess.
Yeah. Claudine. I feel like I have to say that with an accent. Claudine Petrie, also known as DeeDee, was born in Chack Bay, Louisiana in 1967. She was one of 5 children. And later on, her relatives would describe her saying that she had a habit of stealing from her family as retaliation, which, classy. That's just a good person right there.
Yeah, basically petty theft for when she didn't get her way.
Yeah, that's just a classy person from the beginning.
Great characteristic to have.
You know, let's just start out well.
Yeah.
And her family also suspected that she might have killed her own mother by denying her food. Classy.
Yeah. So basically, her mother, her birth mother, died while under her care later in life. And the family will tell you to this day, you can see their interviews. They talk about how they are suspect that she basically killed her mother from neglect.
Yeah.
Just straight neglect, which I don't understand how you do that to your own family member or anyone, but much less your own mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right from the get-go, we have petty theft and then a suspicious death potentially caused from DeeDee Blanchard.
Yeah. She just wasn't a great person from birth, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a motorcycle or something.
Yeah, so upbringing, not a great start. Or not her upbringing, just her...
Just
actions.
Who she decided to be in life.
Yeah. So then at age 24, she gets pregnant with a man named Rod Blanchard, who was 17 at the time, which that's a whole story in and of itself.
Yeah, I didn't realize, actually, until I was doing research for this episode, that he was 17 when she got pregnant.
Yeah, and that,
like,
actually crazy.
Yeah.
24 and 17, that's a pretty, like, hefty age gap for those ages. She got pregnant, and they decided to get married. Because of the pregnancy. However, before Gypsy was even born, the father, Rod Blanchard, realized that he was getting into this marriage for the wrong reasons. So they ended up getting divorced before the baby was born. And the baby was Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
She got her name because DeeDee liked the name Gypsy. And Rod was a big fan of Guns N' Roses.
I did not know that. Wow.
So, yeah. What the heck?
Rod had good taste in music. I'll give him that.
I'm glad that's not... He did have good taste in music, but you know what? I guess he could have picked Gypsy Gun. or Gypsy. Yeah, that's really it.
Yeah.
When they separated, it was just right before Gypsy was born, and so DeeDee moved in with her family and lived with them for a few years, didn't she?
Quite some time, I want to say. Yeah. So fast forward a few years, and by age 3, by age 3, DeeDee was convinced, according to Rod, that Gypsy had health issues, more specifically sleep apnea, and she took her to the hospital very often for testing. And no testing ever came back confirming any of the things that DeeDee thought was going on. But DeeDee just became obsessed, basically, with the idea that Gypsy had tons of health issues. And according to her, these health issues were due to an, quote, unspecified chromosomal disorder.
Yeah. Sure.
What does that even mean?
Right?
It's just crazy to me because none of the tests that you're bringing your daughter to, to have done to find out what's going on that you're claiming is going on are coming back conclusive or confirmed. So I don't understand where she got this from. There are sources that say that DeeDee did at some point work in a medical capacity. By the way, this is pretty important to know going forward. Again, these are just some sources say that. It's kind of hard to confirm whether that was true or not, but
that she was like a nurse or something of a similar job
variety. Yeah,
which would make sense if she, with medication or whatever, it would be a good background for her to have if she was going to be administering it for Gypsy and all that. Or just to know what some of these things were, because there's some pretty random things that she was saying that Gypsy suffered from.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're gonna have a sickly child, having a medical background could be very handy as far as caring for. So just again, something to keep in mind going forward in this story, that she potentially had some prior knowledge about illnesses, medications, things like that. Around this time, though, DeeDee and Gypsy Rose were living with DeeDee's stepmom and her father. And at this time, her stepmother ended up getting really sick, kind of out of nowhere, kind of unexplainable, but was just chronically very deathly ill. DeeDee's dad kind of thought and was worried that she was kind of on her deathbed. It was to that level of seriousness. Ironically enough, whenever DeeDee and Gypsy ends up moving out of this house, the stepmother remarkably got better. So, yeah, it is said and suspected that DeeDee was poisoning her stepmom's food, specifically with weed killer, according to the family. And this obviously led to her being very sick, bedridden even. So again, just another instance of a mother figure in her life being sick, neglected, abused by DeeDee.
Yeah.
Which it's just not looking good for DeeDee at this point.
No.
What kind of picture is this painting? Not a good one.
She just wasn't one of those just, classy ladies walking around and taking care of people. She was just not a good egg.
No. And what's interesting is that her family, and specifically her dad, he was so sure of the fact that DeeDee was poisoning the stepmom that he actually confronted her about it. Mm-hmm. And that ended up being the reason that they ended up moving out.
Yeah.
And when they did move out, they moved to a house in Slidell, Louisiana, which is around the New Orleans area. And they moved into public housing there. Mm-hmm. And like I said, whenever they moved out, the mom just started feeling better and was doing great.
What an idea.
Yeah. Sus, if you ask me.
Yeah. At some age, I couldn't find what age, she became convinced that Gypsy was suffering from muscular dystrophy and started making her use a walker. Not too terribly long after that, and according to Gypsy, she was between 7 or 8. She was riding on her grandfather's motorcycle, and they were involved in a minor accident. She got a small abrasion to her knee, which her mother then rushed her to the hospital over and claimed that she was going to need surgery, and that she was then given a wheelchair from the doctors and said that she needed to use it. And pretty much from that time on, Gypsy was wheelchair bound. You never really saw her outside of it. She went and ended up with a pretty nice, wheelchair setup. I mean, she was able to get some help there and got her, comfortable in that. So,
yeah. And it kind of seems like after that accident is just whenever Gypsy's health really started to decline. And man, the things that she suffered from medically were just the list, man, laundry list of illnesses and things. So here, I'll just go ahead and name a few of them to you. Muscular dystrophy was one of them. Epilepsy, she had seizures, severe allergies, asthma, learning difficulties. DeeDee says that she had the mental capacity of a 7 or 8 year old. And that stemmed from the premature birth, which resulted in that brain capacity. She also had brain damage, sleep apnea, which I think I mentioned before. She was hearing and vision impaired and also had leukemia, according to DeeDee. That's a lot.
It's a lot for anyone to have, but especially a kid. She got these these diagnoses when she was pretty young. I'd say she had most of them by the time she was 10-ish, right? A large majority of them. Which that's a lot as a kid.
That's a lot. And you would imagine having a child with that many medical needs would get very expensive.
Yeah.
And, they struggled as a family for a while. They were living in public housing, having to pay for all of these things. DeeDee was actually arrested at one point for writing bad checks. So you could see maybe the financial struggle there. But, they spent a lot of time at the hospital once they moved to Slidell. And Gypsy had a lot of surgeries during that time.
She did. Was she, you might know this, was she on the feeding tube then, or was it later on that she had to be put on that?
Again, fact check me, but I'm pretty sure it was during that time that she had the feeding tube put in.
Yeah.
Which
That's
is
what I was thinking as well.
Yeah, it was very painful, by the way. I didn't know much about feeding tubes and things, but she had a port in her stomach or something. And so having to get that changed was very painful, very uncomfortable. We said she was wheelchair bound due to the muscular dystrophy.
And that injury to her leg.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with, DeeDee's possible background with medical care, probably made it just a little bit easier for her to juggle. I'm sure there's lots of medications and things like that are involved in having someone that's that sick.
Well, I mean, by the age of I don't know, how old are you in second grade? In second grade, by the time Gypsy Rose was in second grade, DeeDee had pulled her from public school to homeschool her, just because of all of these medical ailments and the learning disability as well. So she took her out and homeschooled her, and they would go on a lot of field trips and stuff, Disney World, what have you. DeeDee would always remind people when they met them, she has a mental capacity of a 7-year-old. Please make sure you talk to her as such. When, once she got older and started looking older, people would make sure that, people would be aware. People really rallied around them eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. And she was able to take quite a few trips with Make-A-Wish and things like that. She loved princesses and kind of all those like fairy tale kind of things. She dressed up a lot as like a princess or something. And so she was able to kind of really go after, and see those things that she really loved and enjoyed and all that, which was really cool. I mean, it's really cool to see like a community come around people
Yeah,
who need it.
for sure. And what really allowed them to kind of gain, I don't want to say attention, but I'm not sure what other word to use here, was when Hurricane Katrina hit, Slidell, New Orleans area. They did lose their home in Slidell, and so they were displaced. And their story kind of got out. So in 2005, they ended up moving to a town called Aurora, Missouri, to a house that was built specifically for their needs, through Habitat for Humanity. By this point, we said Gypsy was wheelchair bound, so they had, all of the necessary things for her for the wheelchair. She was also on the feeding tube and the oxygen tank at this point. So it was a big relief, and the community really welcomed them into their place with open arms. And they rallied to help them out a lot, Everyone knew them. They were very well known around town.
Yeah. And unfortunately, when Katrina hit, they lost all of Gypsy's medical records. So a lot of the things like, that she had documentation of were kind of lost, especially because a lot of the care that she was getting was in like New Orleans and that area. So I'm sure that like, there was just some loss of, it's not like she could go to the doctor's office and get information, because I'm sure that they lost some documentation as well.
For sure. I mean, everything was destroyed.
Yeah. So that would be really hard, especially with like, you have to really fight for that again.
Yeah. And whenever they moved up to the town in Missouri into that house, that's kind of when all of the charity really amped up around them, the Make-A-Wish Foundation. That's whenever all of those things started. She was able to meet actually Miranda Lambert through Make-A-Wish, because she had leukemia. At one point, a GoFundMe was set up for the family to help with just the cost of medication and general living expenses for the family. They had gone through a lot. They've gone through a hurricane, being displaced, and on top of all of these medical issues, you can imagine how, that's tough. That's really hard.
Yeah.
So everyone was just very charitable to this family. That DeeDee actually, whenever they moved up there, she was, telling her neighbors and her new friends that they had escaped Louisiana. They had escaped this awful situation with the abusive family that they were part of, and also Gypsy's father. And say she would tell these people that Rod, that the father, never paid child support and never wanted to even see Gypsy, which was just heartbreaking to hear. So, she didn't really want Rod around anyway because, she said he was abusive or what have you. So Gypsy never really knew her dad. Didn't really have much of a relationship with him, unfortunately.
Yeah, she only talked with him on the phone like very rarely. Like for her birthdays, like only a couple times.
Yeah, exactly. So not much of. I mean, really, all Gypsy had was her mom. She didn't really have any friends her age or friends really in general. I think the closest thing she had to a friend was her neighbor. I want to say, I don't want to say her name incorrectly, but I believe it's pronounced Aaliyah or Alea.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, she was a little older, but around Gypsy's age. Yeah. And she was kind of a big sister figure for Gypsy.
Yeah, and she would just, talk with the Aaliyah, or however you say her name, just kind of about like life things and about like her dreams and hopes and things that she was wanting out of life. A lot of people who met Gypsy were very charmed by her. She was a very sweet, kind girl. She was very small. She wore these really large, like, grandma glasses that a lot of, like your grandmas back in the 90s would wear.
Yeah, like Coke bottle style glasses.
Yeah. And she was like barely 5 foot tall. I feel like she was just really skinny. She was just a very small person. So she kind of just had this ability to bring people over.
And her voice.
She sounded very young, yeah. Very high pitched.
She did. She had a very high pitched, very small sounding voice, as the way I would describe it. But so very sweet.
She was bald from the leukemia and the treatment for that and everything, so she often would wear like wigs or hats. She often had like an oxygen tank or feeding tube with her. And so I think that, like a lot of times when you see someone like that, like you just kind of feel like, you want to just like take care of them and be like, kind to them, and like, like life already sucks, so you don't want to add to it, and like, I don't know, she just seemed very sweet and kind, and like everything you hear, like Gypsy was just like such a likable person.
And even in interviews, or I mean, because they became pretty well known, and many charities were helping them out, so they would go on these Make-A-Wish things, or one time she sang at an event, and there's a little interview clips with them, just kind of talking about what they had been through, and even in those interviews you can just tell that Gypsy Rose was just very kind-hearted. She seemed very kind-hearted, very just a good person, a light in the dark world that she had to live through.
Gypsy just seemed to continue to get worse, which I think you would kind of expect almost with somebody who has as many like, health issues and everything. It probably at some point you just have to feel like, okay, well, like what's next, I guess.
And I don't think her life expectancy was meant to be very long. Like I want to say that she was kind of not expected to live very long, I guess.
Yeah.
With all of her ailments and everything. They didn't think she would make it very far.
And so she just continued to have to get more and more medical treatment. DeeDee had some of Gypsy's saliva glands treated with Botox because she had excessive drooling, DeeDee said. And then later she had them actually extracted altogether, which I wonder, does she have like a dry mouth after that? Oh yeah, this actually says it. I missed it when I was researching. The lack of those glands caused her to have like a really dry mouth, and so her teeth decayed. And so she had a lot of her teeth extracted, which is terrible. She also had a lot of ear infections, which feels like it's pretty common in kids. So she had to have tubes put into her ears, which I feel like that's like one of the more normal issues that she had.
Yeah, that's pretty common to get tubes in your ears,
So she just had, it just continued on and on and on with all of these different medical problems and everything that she was having to dig into. That just has to be a lot, to see like your family, like suffering that way, like especially from her, grandpa and then her like step grandma and everything. And I wonder, because I know her dad wasn't super involved in her life, I wonder how much he knew of like what was going on. Probably not much.
It doesn't seem like much, and we'll get into that a bit later, but yeah, but I mean, Gypsy had the mental delay, the learning disabilities and things like that, so she wasn't allowed to be online unless she was being monitored by DeeDee. So they actually shared a Facebook account, and the Facebook account was called Gypsy Blanchard that they shared. They would, just share things. They had a lot of friends on there because, as we said before, they were very well known in the community, very well liked, kind of local celebrities, if you will. So they did have a lot of friends on their Facebook account that they shared between the two of them.
Yeah, and they, like you said, that they were really like local celebrities. If you ever want to go see like videos of them to kind of see like who they are and everything, I mean, it's super easy to find an interview or anything talking about them or seeing them at events and things like that, because they were at a lot of them. So
on the shared Facebook account, there was a suspicious and worrisome post that was made by potentially DeeDee or Gypsy. Police on June 14th, 2010 actually got a phone call from one of their Facebook friends reporting this and saying that they were worried and they wanted to have a wellness check done on Gypsy and DeeDee. The Facebook post in question, some people kind of thought it was a joke, maybe something about a movie they were watching, or kind of like a live tweet almost.
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising, but at the same time, like, people post weird stuff sometimes,
right? And so some people thought maybe, they got hacked, and then others thought it was serious and were actually concerned, like this friend was that made the call in. The Facebook status read, "That bitch is dead." Sorry for the swear word, guys, but you gotta read it like it is.
Yeah, there's gonna be more where that came from in just a minute, so
yeah,
plug your ears. I mean, it's really like open to interpretation, and I don't think that, like, if I were to see that, I don't know that I would automatically go to like something bad either. Like, I think that I would just kind of assume like movie or something, or like maybe you didn't realize, or I don't know. How do you not realize you post that? But
I think I would be more likely to think it was hacked, to be honest, than I would be to like actually be like read that and be like, oh my god, I need to call the police, something weird's happening. But for whatever reason, this person just had a feeling and called it in. So people were commenting, what's going on? They were concerned underneath, what's happening, what is this about? And they got an answer. They got a reply. The shared account ended up commenting on this post when people were asking what's going on, and mind your ears because this one's rough. But it read, "I effing slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet innocent daughter. Her scream was so effing loud, LOL."
Yeah, ending with LOL.
So obviously people were now very concerned about the family. Neighbors went over to the house to check in, see what was going on. The police were called and they did go to investigate, to do the wellness check. But with wellness checks, you knock on the door, and if they answer, they answer. If not, there's not really much they can do. The windows were all closed for the most part. They couldn't really see into the house. The curtains, were closed. And so the neighbors were allowed by the police to try and get in. So the neighbors ended up getting into the house, but they were not allowed to touch anything while in there. So that means they couldn't open any doors that were shut. Couldn't move anything around because it could be potentially evidence. So while the police are, sitting in the driveway waiting on a search warrant to go inside and check things out, they allowed this neighbor to go in. Something that the neighbor noted, of course, they already noted that their vehicle is still in the driveway. They can't really go anywhere without that vehicle because of Gypsy's wheelchair. So that is concerning right off the bat, and once the neighbor that had gone into the house to have a look around came back, they reported that, Nothing really looked out of place or undisturbed. They were only able to go into a few of the rooms as they couldn't open any doors, but they did note that all of Gypsy's wheelchairs were still in the house. So that was another kind of alarm bell that was ringing at this point.
Yeah, because she can't get far without that. Like, that's very much, like, necessary. Like, she wasn't small enough that she could really just be carried easily. So they don't have the car and they don't have her wheelchair. Like, she's not going to get very far very fast.
Right. Where are they? You know, like how are they? Are they in the house? Are they not? If they are in the house, why aren't they answering? You know, at this point, there's a lot of people that are concerned, and trying to get in touch with them and trying to, you know, check in on them, and they're just not having any luck. So, at around 11 p.m., the police finally secured the search warrant. And that's when they were finally able to go into the house and found a very disturbing scene in front of them.
Yeah. Before we get into that really fast, though, I just looked it up. That post is still on Facebook. Just the first one. It looks like they maybe deleted that second comment or something. Because I'm not finding that one as I'm like looking through. But geez, I'm really surprised that they never like took this down or took down the Facebook account or anything, you know?
Or at least privated it, but I guess
Yeah, and it's like I'm obviously not friends with her, but like
it's public, yeah. Wow.
yeah. So, okay, I just wanted to see, I had hoped that I could see if it was still here because it was a few years ago when I had looked into it.
That's surprising. I'd never even imagined that, you know?
They started searching through the house and they found DeeDee laying on the floor. She had multiple stab wounds on her torso and neck, and had obviously been dead for a few days at that time. And Gypsy was nowhere. I think at this point, like, you just have to be like shocked because they were such a like big part of like that community and also like back in Louisiana. It wasn't like they were just like a nobody or people who had been known to be up to like terrible things where, you know, someone would get kidnapped and murdered.
Right. So at this point, like, Gypsy's declared missing as a missing person. And I mean, everyone was just shocked. Like, who would do this to this family who's had such a hard time? You know, they're such nice people. Who would come in and murder a caretaker, essentially, like a loving mother who's taking care of her very ill daughter, and the daughter is now missing. She's on loads of medication. She has a lot of medical needs. I mean, the thought overall was just that she probably wasn't going to be found alive, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of that medication looked, you know, to people who weren't, you know, medical professionals, but looked like it was important, you know, like she needed it in order to, you know, make it for very long, which when you're that sick makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the feeding tube alone. Yeah. And so at this point, a GoFundMe page was actually set up for both of their funerals just because they assumed that there would be no finding her alive, which is very, very sad. The community, as I said, was just in shock. This wasn't a place where things like this happened, you know?
Yeah, it really isn't. So the police continued to, you know, investigate. They still wanted to know what the heck happened. They were able to use that Facebook status and trace the IP address, and it gave them a location. And so they got a name. His name is Nicholas Godejohn. And so they kind of asked around. They were like, "Hey, do any of you guys like recognize this name?" Aaliyah, the neighbor, who was kind of like a big sister to Gypsy, recognized his name, and she was able to give them messages between that were from Gypsy and her. I think they were text messages or something, weren't they?
Text messages, Facebook messages,
something,
yeah.
With Gypsy talking about her secret boyfriend named Nick. And so they were kind of able to start putting 2 and 2 together, but they didn't have like enough information yet to even put all of that completely together.
And basically, like, Gypsy wasn't really supposed to have access to any type of messaging, like, without her mom's permission. So this was all done behind her mom's back. They later find out, that she, like I said, couldn't be on the internet. She couldn't have her own personal Facebook account. So these messages to her friend Aaliyah were secret. And they would talk about things like friends do, or like you do to your big sister. Gypsy in these messages claimed that she was madly in love with this guy that she met online, Nick. They met on a Christian dating site, and no one knew about him. The only person who knew about him was Aaliyah. In investigating this, they find out that Gypsy had something like over 5+ secret Facebook accounts that she used to talk to Nick, so that her mom wouldn't find out, because she couldn't talk to him through their shared Facebook, obviously. She was worried that her mom would find out and react badly for multiple of reasons, one of them being the age gap between them. Gypsy at the time was 18 and Nick was 24. So
So it's quite a big gap, but it's not. I mean, she's kind of following in her mom's footsteps in that one when he was 17 and she was 24. So maybe she didn't think it was that big of a deal.
Right. The thing there was people, were worried, and even Aaliyah was worried because she thought that Gypsy might be like falling victim to trafficking or something like that, like a perv on the internet, because she's mentally delayed. She has this mental delay, and this man is 24. So she was concerned.
Yeah, and the internet's a scary place.
Yeah, exactly. And this is in 2010, so a good while ago, where online dating and things were definitely less accepted just in the general public. So
it seemed like Gypsy was able to, kind of talk with Aaliyah about a lot of those things that were going on. Kind of like the things that she and Nicholas were into, which were super like inappropriate and things like that. And while she did continue to try and like convince her not to, Gypsy didn't really care to listen, as most 18-year-olds do.
Right. Yeah. So actually in 2014, Gypsy had told Aaliyah that she and Nick were talking about eloping, and had even gone as far as to discuss their children's names. So, but Aaliyah, again, she thought it was just like a fantasy dream world that Gypsy Rose was living in, and that it wouldn't actually happen. But because of the inappropriate and sexual nature of Gypsy and Nick's conversations, she was a little concerned. So the police got all this information, and obviously main target is Nick at this point.
Yeah. They, had some theories, but it took a little while for them to figure out what exactly happened.
Before police kind of went to question, well, I mean, before any of this happened, really, back in 2015, Gypsy and Nick were trying to plan a secret, accidentally on purpose meetup with her mom. So they were planning to do this at a movie theater, and Gypsy really liked Disney movies, and her mom would go to the movie theater all the time to see like the newest movie that had just come out or whatever. And so they planned to have Nick bump into them at the movie theater, in Springfield, Missouri, and kind of make it look like an accident. Nick would later claim that Gypsy was very forward with him right away and basically wanted to sleep together right away. All of that happens, and Nick was actually never introduced to DeeDee, which was the plan all along, but they never went through with it.
Yeah. Well, DeeDee seemed like, I don't know how true it is, but she seems kind of like she would have been like very cautious about like having her meet anybody. Because there's weird people out there. You never know what you're gonna run into. So, and you never know what, they're gonna want or anything. I don't know. I'm cautious about people I meet everywhere. So
that's very true. Well, and then also like in the investigation before police ever confronted Nick, when they were just going through all of these online conversations between Gypsy and Nick, they found a lot of her Facebook pages and her posts, and a lot of, like, for instance, one of the things that Gypsy would post was, quote, "Is it wrong to think about your wedding before you're engaged?" So she clearly like had these very strong feelings for Nick, and that only intensified police's suspicion of his involvement. In those messages, they also kind of found out about their inappropriate messaging and looked up Nick. He did have a criminal history. He was previously charged for indecent exposure in 2013. He was arrested in a McDonald's for exposing himself. He was in there for like 9 hours. Kind of crazy.
Yeah, I don't know how it took 9 hours.
Right, like how do you not notice that? But whatever.
This is the largest McDonald's that ever existed.
Right. Whenever he was arrested, the police found like a huge knife on him. So now they're thinking that he could be violent. He also has multiple personality disorder and is autistic as well. So not looking like it's very promising that it wouldn't be Nick at this point. They're very involved. They talked about eloping. He has a violent past. DeeDee was found with stab wounds. They're very sus.
And he just kind of seemed like a loose cannon. He wasn't super predictable. You weren't really sure what he was going to do next. And it just seemed like that was like something you could bet on, was the fact that he was going to be unpredictable, which is, I mean, it's always scary with anything. So especially when you find a knife on someone like that, like, no thank you.
Yeah. And it was a large knife. It's not like it was a pocket knife that they found in him. Like, it was a sizable knife.
Yeah, not the kind of thing you just carry to Walmart, or not to Walmart, but to McDonald's whenever you decide to go be inappropriate there. I don't know. I don't understand people who think like that.
No, me either. Police end up going to Nick's house to question him. I mean,
understandably,
letting him know that, he's in connection with this murder, and they go to find out what he's got to say about it. Whenever they brought him into the station, he openly admitted, he straight up, he was like, "I will admit to stabbing her. I will admit to killing her."
There was no hesitation, no runaround, no like, "Oh, no, I didn't do it." And then 5 hours later, he admits it. Like, he was just like, "Yeah, I did it. So what?" He was almost like proud of it, is what it almost seemed like. If you like see the interview, which you can find like interviews online, like it was just kind of like, "Yeah, I did it."
Yeah. See, I read it more as like not even a pride thing, just like so nonchalant, like doesn't even care. Like basically telling someone like, "Yeah, I went to the store. So what?" Except for he's saying, "Yeah, I stabbed her and killed her."
He murdered someone.
Right.
And didn't just, I mean, like, he, like, stabbed the crap out of her. Like, it wasn't, like,
multiple stab wounds.
Yeah.
It was brutal. The way the state that her body was found in was horrific. Once they find out this information, and Nick admits to it, the town is in hysterics. They're wondering what's going on. They want to know, where is Gypsy? Who killed DeeDee? What's happening? And so they go
Why?
to make, why? What caused this? What monster would do, what monster would do this? Police make a public statement, and all they say, and it's, honestly, I don't know why this is so eerie to me, but the way that the officer kind of announced it, he just said, "What I'll say is things are not always as they appear." And he pretty much left it at that. And so you're left to wonder, what is he talking about? Like, what do you mean things aren't always as they appear? This person's been murdered. What do you mean? But boy, he was right.
So they were able to kind of put together what happened after their interviews with both. They interviewed both of them, Nicholas and Gypsy.
Well, we didn't even say that Gypsy was found.
Oh, yeah. Well, Gypsy was found. She was with Nick, and she was very obviously not being held against her will. She was, like, just very obviously chilling. So they were like, okay, what the heck is going on? Do you not know what happened? And she initially was like, oh my God, like, are you serious? That happened? Like, what are you talking about? They just said that they were going to take me, blah, blah, blah. All of this, I just left on my own will. Like, whatever. Her stories don't make sense. And she has like a 5-hour interview, isn't it, right? Like, online. It's super long.
No, she has a very, very long interrogation. But, I mean, something of note to mention is that whenever police found her, she didn't bring any of her wheelchairs with her. She was walking.
Yeah.
Homegirl could walk.
Mm-hmm.
She was walking around. She did not seem sick at all. She didn't have a feeding tube or her oxygen tank. So the police were just stunned at this point because they thought they were looking for a very sickly, very in need, little frail person, and that's not what they found.
No.
They found a very healthy, very mobile Gypsy Rose.
Yeah. Just hanging out. So they were able to put together kind of what happened the night that Gypsy went missing, and I use air quotes because of obvious reasons. So they put together that Nicholas had gone back to Springfield in June 2015, and he waited until DeeDee had gone to sleep, and then he went to their house where Gypsy let him in and was like, "Hi, welcome. This is going to be great." And gave him duct tape, gloves, and a knife that he would use to, we assume, use to murder DeeDee. Gypsy hid in the bathroom and covered her ears so that she would not have to hear her mother screaming, which to me is like, I don't know, like, I can't imagine any of it.
There's no way she didn't hear something.
No.
Like, in interviews later, she even talks about how she did hear some stuff. And what's even more, like, gut-wrenching and just, like, stomach-turning to me is that you can see the text messages that they sent back and forth to one another.
Yeah.
While planning this murder. And Gypsy is almost excited about it. Like, when you read her messages to Nick and Nick to Gypsy, they make your skin crawl. Like, let me read these to you. This is the night that they're planning to do it. Gypsy says, again, there's going to be some language in here, so Mom, if you're listening, stop.
Like yours.
Yeah. Gypsy says, quote, "The shit's gonna go down tonight." And Nick responds and says, "Babe, it's my evil side doing it. He won't mess up because he enjoys killing." And Gypsy responds, "We'll be happy soon. After this night, we will never bring it up." I mean, how do you talk about the murder of your mother like that? So they planned the whole thing. I mean, they planned on once DeeDee fell asleep, Gypsy would call him, supply him with the necessary things that he would need to do it. And one of the text message that she sent said, quote, "I left the gloves outside the front door and the screen door is squeaky, so try to open it just enough to get in and close it gentle. I'll hand you the knife and duct tape inside, darling." And then she sends another text so casually. And this just kind of shows you the mental space that she was in. Because next, following that, she says, I'm doing my nails too. I'm painting them a dark pink. Like,
which to me, I say,
what?
And any of the moms that I know that are listening, close your ears, but like, that bitch, you know? Like,
right. You're
Jesus.
waiting for your mom to fall asleep so that your boyfriend can come and kill her. And so while waiting, you're just going to paint your nails and be so, like, cavalier about it.
You're just like, yeah, let me pick. Do I want to go with dark pink? Do I want red? Well, red might, you know, be a little triggering after tonight. So maybe I should do pink.
Right.
Bruh.
What?
Jeez.
Pardon?
So then he goes in to DeeDee's bedroom and stabbed her 17 times in the back while she was sleeping, which to me is like, jeez. And as you're reading the texts, I had forgotten about the one where he was like, babe, it's my evil side doing it. He won't mess up because he enjoys killing. Like, one of the things I think we haven't brought up was like, he had talked about how so much like how he really wanted to kill somebody. He was like that was like an excitement for him, which is so sick.
Right. With his personality disorder, he had multiple personalities, and one of them, I can't remember what he called it or what they referred to it as. I can't
remember either. Like Victor or something like that, I feel like.
I don't know. It was like an evil personality that he had, though. It was very sick and twisted, and this is the personality that he would bring out when they would talk about killing and all of this stuff. And he even at one point, it comes out much later, that he had told Gypsy Rose that he wanted his other personalities to have a girlfriend too. So she had been raised as like, the women are submissive to whoever they're with. So in like cooperation with that belief that she had been taught, submitted to him, right? And made up characters and other personalities for each of his personalities to have a girlfriend with. So you can only imagine what kind of character she had to create for this evil personality that he had.
Okay, so there's a girl, I can't remember what her name is, on TikTok. She has like longer, like reddish, blondish hair, and she's super funny, and she'll always be like, if they do this, then it's a red flag. And that's what I thought of, and I was like, yeah, she could make one about this and be like, you know, if your significant other has multiple personalities and wants you to have a girlfriend or a personality for each of their, so they can be girlfriends, like red flag. And and that's not to like make fun of people who have multiple personality disorder or any of that. Like, I'm not trying to be that, but like, bruh, that's a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, okay, again, going back to that, on one of her secret Facebook pages, one of her posts reads, quote, I am embracing my role and duties. I am learning more about myself. I am confident and fulfilled. I live and breathe to serve my master. That is scary to hear a young girl say or post about on Facebook. Someone who you think is so ill, so like mentally delayed. It's almost disturbing to hear that from someone like that. And then to know that she is referring to Nicholas Godejohn.
Yeah.
This person, like, with this history and this, it's scary.
It really is. So, but to get back on tangent. So he stabbed DeeDee 17 times in her back, which that's like an anger level of,
it's like a crime of passion, nearly.
Yeah. They went and had sex in Gypsy's room, which I cannot imagine that after you just had your mother murdered. Anyways, took $4,000 in cash that DeeDee had been keeping in the house. Then they fled to a motel outside Springfield where they stayed for a few days to plan their next move. Which you would think, like, it seems like all of their planning, which they had been planning this for a little while, all of their planning was simply the murder. They didn't plan a dang thing for the moment after, you know?
No, they really didn't. And honestly, the time that they spent in the motel, there's video footage of some of their time spent there. They had like recorded some things themselves, and they are acting just euphoric. I don't know what other word to use. And I want to say that they were like in the hotel doing drugs and
and they went to stores and stuff like that. Like there's lots of camera footage of them all over the place, just like living their life, like they were visiting Springfield for the first time or wherever they were. But
well, and at this point, Gypsy is like wearing. She started to wear a blonde wig not too long after the murder, to disguise herself because people knew her, and then people knew her already. She had a very unique look. I don't think that there's really anyone else that you would mistake for her. And she was so well known, and now even more well known because she's thought to be a missing person. So people are on the lookout for her. So she's wearing this wig, and then they make a decision that just I will never understand.
I laugh because of the stupidity of the decision that was made. And ultimately, I'm glad that they were stupid.
Yeah, because it made things much easier for the police, and for the truth to come out. But
it really did.
What they did
really worked well for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but what idiots here? They still had the murder weapon, the knife. Why did they keep it? Who knows? But they did. And what they did with the knife, instead of discarding it somewhere, they mailed it. They mailed it to Nick's house in Wisconsin, because they didn't want to have to take it with them to catch the bus. So they mailed it to Nick's house, and it was waiting there for them. When they got there, they ended up hopping a bus to Nick's house in Wisconsin, but they mailed the murder weapon to the murderer's house.
You heard that? They mailed it. They put the knife into an envelope and were like, this is a good idea. And then they dropped it in the mail and they sent it to his dang house.
Where his parents live, by the way. He lived with his parents. And that's what he did. I'm sorry, but the lack of thought here is just astonishing, and it's not funny. It is not a funny story. I'm sorry to laugh, but I'm laughing because it's ridiculous.
Just the lunacy of it all is all of this you thought was a great idea, and then you just went and made the ultimate stupid one. You know?
Right. So
how any of this was a good idea is beyond me. But then you went and you just really knocked that ball right out of the park.
Out of it. It's nowhere to be seen.
No.
Yeah. So anyway, once they get to Nick's house, they're waiting around a few days. Her mom's just, sorry to be graphic, but laying in a pool of her blood in her house alone. Dead, and they're just kind of waiting to hear news of it, and they haven't for a few days. So now Gypsy and Nick are kind of getting worried. I think maybe some guilt is starting to come up for Gypsy. She just wants somebody to find her mom.
I hope so.
And so the Facebook status that was posted that prompted all of the search was actually written by Gypsy Rose from Nick's computer. So she composed it. He's the one that actually did the post itself, but this was Gypsy's idea. She wrote it.
Yeah. And that is when they started to learn more that led to that weird statement by, was it the sheriff?
Yeah, the statement of things are not always what they seem.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, people still didn't know. The general public did not know that Gypsy had been found and been okay and able to walk. They knew that she had been found. That was released at the very least. But no one knew that she was able to walk until her trial. from my understanding. So, I mean, can you imagine the shock?
Yeah, I think that when they did start her trial was when a lot of that information like became public. But then, oh boy, did they learn?
And you think there's not going to be any more twists and turns to the story, by the way, but there are. Just wait. More things come out, and it gets even crazier. So, basically, the police obviously interrogate Nick and Gypsy. You know, they found all of this information. They literally mailed themselves a murder weapon. There's CC whatever camera footage of them at the hotel walking around after the murder. Like, it's just the evidence that is stacked up against them at this point is undeniable. So they do both eventually get charged with. Initially, they were both charged with first-degree murder, and they could have been charged with the death penalty in that state, but
the prosecutor said that he didn't want to go after life in prison, life without parole, or the death penalty because the case was extraordinary and unusual, which to me is like, there's a lot of, serial killers out there doing extraordinary and unusual things. That sounded like I support serial killing, and that is not the case. But just for clarification there. But it just to me is like, why? But then they made a lot more things public.
Yeah, and whenever the things that he's referring to came out, things started to make a lot more sense, I think, to the general public. At first, they just looked like cold-blooded killers, and maybe to some, you would still think that after you find out this next information that we have for you guys, but man, oh man, was DeeDee Blanchard not innocent in all of this. What they found once, they started to interrogate Gypsy is mind-blowing, to be quite honest with you. And when she was finally arrested, she told police that all of her illnesses, everything, it was all a charade. It was all a lie. And it all stemmed from her mom. Her mom physically was abusive to her and would keep her in line, basically, by force at times, to keep her in line, to keep up the charade that she was actually sick. And in fact, that was not true. She did have, I think, maybe asthma or something very, very minor and like normal. Like, not normal. That's a bad word to use, but common.
And it wasn't a severe case of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this charade went far, y'all. Like, real far. Like, almost all of her medical stuff was made up. And once the police started digging into this and searching the house and getting more statements and everything, they actually found a list that was written by DeeDee of all of Gypsy's alleged illnesses. And along with that, they found a huge closet full of medication top to bottom. Gypsy's own dad actually believed all of this. Based on her illnesses, he was told by DeeDee that Gypsy probably wouldn't live to be an adult. She would probably live to be about 18 because of all her illnesses. When in actuality, at the time of the murder, Gypsy, who thought she was 18 at the time, was actually 23. So the age gap between her and Nick were not. It wasn't really an age gap. They were pretty much the same age. They were 1 year apart.
They were really close.
Yeah. Come to find out, what was actually going on is something, and it's called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And that is something that DeeDee had. Basically what this is, it's someone who intentionally makes someone ill purposefully, and it is considered a mental disorder. But if you look back at DeeDee's history, you see it all over. With her own mother, with her stepmom, and then with Gypsy. So things started being pieced together, And because of all of this, that stuff that ended up coming out about, what Gypsy had been put through, that's why the prosecutor didn't go for as harsh of a sentence, which, some people agree with, some people don't. Some people think she didn't get long enough. Some people think that it wasn't long enough. Did I say the same thing?
You said the same thing twice.
Some people think it wasn't long enough. Some people think that it was too much. There we go.
And it's just crazy because you think about like how much she had lied. Like what is right? I don't know. I'm so glad I'm not somebody on that case.
I'm glad I wasn't on that case either, because first of all, how awful to learn about all of this. This whole case is just wild. And in hearing Gypsy talk about what she was put through by her, like at the hands of her mother, it's so sad. So terribly sad.
It really is.
Like abuse to a whole different type of level, psychologically, mentally, and physically, just a lot.
Yeah. And as a kid, like she was raised this way.
Yeah.
Believing that there were all these things wrong with her, that she had, all of these terminal conditions and
living in hospitals.
Just to like later learn like none of this is true.
Right.
Yeah.
Literally none of it.
And it wasn't even just her that she was lying to, it was like the entire world.
Yeah.
Like everything that Gypsy knew was based on like this massive lie.
Exactly. She's living in a nightmare.
Yeah.
And she actually likened her life to the movie Tangled, being held captive.
It's fitting.
By her evil mom. And she really felt like there wasn't really a way out for her. There were different reasons behind that, because as she grew older, she realized that certain things were not true. Like her muscular dystrophy, she obviously ended up realizing that she could use her legs and she could walk. And she started to suspect some things as she got older, and as she realized more and more, DeeDee had to get more and more controlling, and that's kind of when more of the physical abuse started. For instance, like Gypsy was really trying to get away. She was really doing what she knew or thought she could do to get out of it. Some people criticize her for, not trying other things, but you can't imagine what was actually like to be her. Putting yourself where she was, like you don't really know what would be the right or wrong thing to do. Probably you like you said, your whole life is a lie at that point.
Yeah. And how do you, when there are that many lies, how do you start to separate the truth from the lie?
Right. Exactly.
Everything that she believed was based on lie. There was very few things that were actual fact and actual truth that she could, stand on to like start to figure out everything that was going on. And
yeah. Well, even like the simplest thing, she didn't know the truth about like her age. So whenever Hurricane Katrina happened and they were displaced and then they moved, like all of her medical history that she claimed was lost, most of it wasn't lost, by the way. That was a lie. DeeDee was it kind of gave her the fuel to make it even bigger than what it was before, because she had a reason to be like, she's been diagnosed with all of these things. I'll just tell you from memory, there is no paperwork from her previous care providers or whatever because of this horrific natural disaster. So people believed her for the most part.
And who's going to question that?
Right. Not many people. One doctor did. He was told by the other doctors to treat the pair with golden gloves. In his report, basically,
WTF.
Yeah, basically what happened is that the doctors that were involved in her life only knew that one of the illnesses that she was suspected or claimed to have was fake, which was the muscular dystrophy. And the only reason that they knew that is because after Hurricane Katrina, she did go in for testing at her new with the new doctors or whatever, and the test came back completely clear, no signs of muscular dystrophy, so they knew that wasn't true. But her mom was like, okay, just stay in the wheelchair, it makes things easier, da 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 da. But the doctor that saw Gypsy and saw DeeDee and their interactions or whatever, he suspected Munchausen by proxy, but he did not report it to social services. And the reason that he didn't is because of, quote, treat the pair with golden gloves. He didn't think that he would be believed by the police if he reported it, and he really just thought that the police would think that he was being a jerk because his family is known, right, to have all of this whatever. Yeah. They have a status in the community. But in his report, he did write, quote, since last seen, I managed to talk to one of her previous providers. She specifically remembers Gypsy Rose and mentioned that her previous neurologist clearly reported the fact that Gypsy Rose does not have muscular dystrophy. He goes on to say, quote, after analyzing all the facts and after talking to her previous pediatrician, there is a strong possibility of Munchausen by proxy with maybe some underlying unknown etiology, I'm not sure how to say that word, to explain for her symptoms. So this doctor suspected it. This doctor pretty much called out what was going on, but
he did, yeah. So if only they had that conversation sooner and he had pulled that out and reported it and everything, dude, it could have saved so much time. But honestly, what would have happened with DeeDee? You know what I mean? She would have continued. She'd already, they suspect that she killed her, or was a foundation at what killed her mom. And then they believe that she also was trying to kill her stepmom. So she has a history of being, and I'm going to say a bad word, but being a giant asshole. Yeah. So why would she stop? Even if Gypsy was taken out of her home.
Well, I think at that point,
who was going to stop her?
If he would have actually been taken seriously, reported this, been taken seriously, an investigation would have happened and this all would have been found out, I really think that DeeDee would have been arrested and charged with abuse.
I would hope so. Child abuse,
at the very least. Yeah, so she would probably have served jail time. Yeah. And or been sent to some kind of mental facility where she could get help for this, thing that she has. But after that, though, I mean, it's just crazy to think that they knew, at least one doctor suspected that this was going on, didn't do anything to stop it. Not to place blame on him, but it does irk me that the other doctors told him, basically don't ruffle any feathers.
I wonder how often that happens in the medical community. Not to say this is a common thing, but how often do you think that concerns are raised and then they're shut down?
I don't know. I hope it's not often, but
I hope so too. But at the same time, it sounded kind of like they knew what to say. So
yeah. Well, I mean, and then even after all of that, Gypsy was basically made to act a certain way when she would go to her doctor's visits. She wasn't allowed to speak usually.
With the when I was talking about her having to get her saliva glands, there we go, those ones, taken out, Gypsy would later claim that her mom would induce her to drool more by using a topical anesthetic to numb her so that she would just drool.
Basically, she would drug her to match the symptoms of whatever she was claiming that was going on.
Or tell her, hey, your leg hurts and it's going to hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Complain that it hurts or else.
Yeah, she wasn't allowed to speak or move her leg. She was told to stay in your wheelchair. For no reason should you move your legs. And she would usually bring a stuffed animal or some kind of doll to her doctor's visits and was instructed by her mother to just basically shut up and play with your toy, which only added to the perception that Gypsy was very delayed and sickly, Some people believed it for the most part. Something else that I want to go back to is disturbing that no one raised questions about this occurrence, but back in 2009 or 2010, it's kind of unclear which year exactly this happened, but Gypsy had been using the internet secretly, and this is before Nick. She had met somebody online, and basically she was romantically involved with this person, and this person ended up in the hospital, and Gypsy was very worried and couldn't ask her mom, obviously, to bring her to the hospital to see him because she would be in trouble. You know, she was going behind her mom's back. She would be reprimanded. So Gypsy walked to her neighbor's house and knocked on the door and asked them to please bring her to the hospital because basically somebody that I care about is there and I want to go see him. He was assaulted by a group of people, basically who believed that he was taking advantage of Gypsy because they thought she was under 18 and this person was older. So they physically assaulted this poor man, and long story short, she ends up getting to the hospital. Someone brought her there. This girl's just walking around as far as we know, like whatever, no one's questioning anything. Maybe she took her wheelchair, I don't know, but she definitely walked over to the neighbor's house. So once she got to the hospital, she actually brought her birth certificate with her. She had, been kind of sneaking around trying to find out some truth to what was going on with her, and she suspected that she was being lied to about her age. So she ends up finding her real birth certificate, and she brought it to the hospital, and somehow DeeDee found out that she was there and brought the fake one, of course, with her that said that she was under 18. And basically DeeDee had the fake one made whenever Katrina happened and blah, blah, blah. But DeeDee had told the doctors and anyone who was around that the one that Gypsy had brought with her, the birth certificate, that one was a fake. It was just a mistake that happened after the hurricane. They had printed the wrong thing. They messed it up what her birthday was, and so they had to get it revised, which was the one that DeeDee had. And she said, this is the real one, the one that made her younger, of course. And she made Gypsy go around and apologize to every single person in the room afterwards. And of course DeeDee was the one that everybody believed, because why wouldn't they?
Yeah, her mom, she had that physical proof, like,
right,
why would they not?
So you can see that, like,
Jeez.
She's trying to advocate for herself, but people are simply just not listening to her or believing her. And DeeDee was so convincing. There was another time where DeeDee found Gypsy in a hotel with another man she had met online. And DeeDee, again, brought the fake birth certificate with her and threatened to call the police on this man, saying that Gypsy was underage. You're with an underage girl, da-da-da-da. Of course, she wasn't underage. She was of age. But after that incident, this happened in 2011, DeeDee went home and found all of the stuff that she was using to communicate with these people. And she took a hammer and bashed the phone and the computer, completely destroyed and obliterated it, and leashed Gypsy to a bed and left her there for a while.
Yeah.
And she threatened to use the hammer in the same way that she used on the computer and the phone. She threatened to use the hammer on her fingers if she did it again.
What a great mother. Just a
right?
classy woman right there.
Yeah, you just see the abuse just intensify as the years progress. I think it was just her, she didn't know how else to control Gypsy at this point because she's becoming aware,
Yeah.
And after that incident, she told Gypsy, and this is why Gypsy thought she wouldn't be believed if she actually spoke to the police. She told Gypsy that she filed paperwork with the police, basically saying that she was mentally incompetent. So she thought she couldn't go to the police because she thought she wouldn't be believed.
Wow.
So But yeah, the control tactics that she used were just insane.
They really were. And there's so many more that, like, I mean, that we probably might not even know of, because she constantly was doing like these little things that, you know, to just make sure that Gypsy wasn't sharing any of this information and blah blah blah. Like, it's just so messed up, you know. And I feel bad for Gypsy. I don't think she should have murdered her mom, but I'm sure that she also just, like, didn't know what to do, you know? And when she has that lack of, like, she's always been treated like a child, she's going to kind of think like a child. So how is she supposed to really know better? But also, how is she supposed to know how to, like, make the situation right when she knows that it's so wrong, you know? And not none of that is to say that she should have murdered her mom, but that has to be, like, a hard place to be in. Like, I can't imagine. So, like, what is the correct way? No one, like, people had suspicion and no one was helping her. So she kind of had to take matters into her own hands. I think she could have handled it better.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I think murder's the answer. But
no. And she admits that. I mean, if you can watch interviews of her now, pretty recent ones, and she admits, like, you know, I'm sure there are better ways. I know there are better ways that I could have handled it, but at the time, that's the only out that I saw. She's remorseful that she did what she did. But again, she says, this is telling. This is very telling. One thing that she said, I don't have the direct quote, was that being in jail was freedom compared to what living with her mother was.
And that is so sad. I feel like that has to be so telling into, like, what life with her mom had to be like.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and people, like, give her dad, her biological dad, or that was the only dad in her life, I guess, but they give him a lot of flack, but he had no idea. Like, he wasn't allowed. He tried, you know, he wasn't this piece of crap guy that DeeDee told everyone that he was. Like, he wanted to be in his daughter's life. He would try and schedule visits to go and see her. You know, he still lived in Louisiana. As far as I know, he still does to this day, but he wasn't allowed to go see her.
Yeah.
He wasn't allowed to really talk to her much on the phone. DeeDee always had a reason that she, you know, Gypsy couldn't come to the phone for numerous amounts of reasons. And
yeah.
And even on her 18th birthday, he called her to wish her happy 18th birthday. And DeeDee made sure to do not mention how old she is. And Rod was like, well, why?
Yeah.
Why not? And she's like, well, because, you know, she's mentally delayed. She thinks she's this age. I think it was like 14.
I think it was like 14, yeah.
And he didn't really question it because he's like, well, I didn't want to confuse her. I didn't want to confuse her, so he didn't mention it. He just said happy birthday, you know? So he really had no idea this was all going on because he wasn't allowed to be in her life. So he's in her life now, which is cool to see.
They seem to be trying. Yeah. Gosh. Like, that's just so... I can only imagine the guilt that he carries for not being involved and knowing, like, what happened, you know?
Yeah.
But he had no involvement.
It's the whole thing is crazy, but with sentencing and everything, I guess we can go ahead and tell you guys what they ended up getting. They had separate trials, and Gypsy, well, her trial was first. She ended up taking a plea deal, which she got because of the abuse that she endured from her mom for so many years. And so her plea deal, she just got charged with second-degree murder, and she's serving 10 years. Which I think, I don't remember when her release date is supposed to be. But for some reason, I feel like it's not that far away.
Yeah.
And then Nick, his trial, I want to say, was in 2019. It was more recent, but he ended up getting a pretty hefty sentence, honestly. A lot of people think that his is a little extreme, but he ended up getting charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action, for which he got life for the first-degree murder charge, and he ended up getting 25 years for the armed criminal action charge. So he's going to be in jail probably for the rest of his life.
Yeah. And there's a lot of mixed feelings about both of their sentences. Like, because DeeDee was ultimately heavily abused in so many different ways by her mom, and he believed that he was just helping her. I personally don't feel like they both got like too light of a sentence. I think even if, they ultimately murdered somebody, instead of going over to the neighbor and being like, look, this is what's going on. She obviously had a way to talk with, the I can't remember, Aaliyah or whatever her name was. She could have shared all of it that way. So I obviously don't think the murder's the answer. I think that it's good that they are serving time. I think he should be serving more. He should have, he's been wanting to murder somebody for a long time. I think he is a threat to society. Maybe a mental facility would have been better for him. But ultimately I don't think he should be free at all.
Yeah, I hope if anything that he's getting some kind of treatment, because he is autistic, so he already has that hurdle to go through or go over, and then he has on top of that this personality disorder, which is, I think, ultimately what allowed him to carry out the murder.
Yeah.
So I definitely think he needs some kind of treatment for that, which I hope he's getting, because as far as I'm understanding, he is just in a regular jail. Like, he's not in anywhere to get like mental health help or anything like that. So
No boy does he need some. They both do.
They both do. Yeah, just for all of the trauma too that Gypsy went through. Like, so crazy to just be so abused,
and it's in so many ways.
Yeah,
like
her whole life too. It's not just like chunks of time, like, oh, this, these years were good, but then, man, we had a bad month. It's not like that. It's like her whole life. 23 years, 24 years. Like, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's just, and it's sick, to see like just how far she was able to take that. That's like 23, 24 years of insane, mass, disgusting, gross abuse in so many ways that just weren't picked up. How do you miss that? And how do you not report that? And, she's going to doctors constantly. Someone should have picked something up. But
yeah, you would think just the behavior that they would have at the doctor's office would warrant something, but I mean, she was clever. You got to give her that. DeeDee was not stupid. She was charming, and she was able to have the knowledge of, like, enough medical knowledge to be able to explain away all of the questions, I think, that were raised. Yeah. So, and on top of that, if Gypsy said anything while at, like, her hospital visits or anything that she wasn't supposed to, or that would raise questions, she was physically punished when she got home. Yeah. It's crazy.
It's just so sad.
Yeah. And I did look up, Gypsy has the possibility to get parole as early as December 2023. So that's less than 2 years. Yeah. Or no, about 2 years, a little over.
I really hope that she gets a lot of help, because you don't walk away from something like that without some serious issues.
Yeah, for sure.
So be interested to see what her life looks like after jail. When they took care of DeeDee's body, no one wanted it. No one, claimed her. Ended up being her parents, right? Who ended up taking her ashes, and they flushed them down the toilet.
Yeah. There's an interview clip. There's a clip of her parents, or her dad at least, being interviewed about that, and they said they asked the family if anyone wanted her ashes or what they wanted to do with her body, and they said nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted it, and they told them to just flush it down the toilet. And that's equally sad and equally telling of
who she was,
what a family thinks about you. Like, your own family thinks so little of you that even after your death, when that's usually when people are like glorifying your life and all these things. They did not do that with her. They did not at all. Flush her down the toilet is what they said, which is, wow, so disrespectful, so very disrespectful. But
I don't think that they're wrong. Like, maybe I'm a bad person. I just don't feel like that's wrong. She doesn't deserve respect. But at the same time, she had a mental health disorder and all of those things. But that's not an excuse to be able to abuse your child for 23 years.
Yeah, that is the one hang up that I have, is that she was struggling with mental illness that she probably didn't even know was a mental illness or that she had. But at the same time, I do agree with you. Mental illness is not an excuse. It's a tough one. I'm curious to know what you guys think about this case.
Yeah. Head over to our Instagram and let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that the sentencing was fair? Do you think that they didn't get enough? Or do you think that Gypsy has already served enough punishment in her life? I know a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Let us know. That's all I've got for today. Megan, what about you?
Yeah. That's about it. I think that's pretty much covered it. So
that's it for the really terribly sad case of the murder of DeeDee Blanchard and Gypsy Rose and Nick Godejohn. If you have any comments about this, or if you're interested in consuming more media about this case, they did make a kind of reenactment series, which they did a really good job of. It's called The Act on Hulu. I would recommend watching that show. Remember, it is a reenactment. It's not like a documentary or anything like that, but they do have those as well if you're interested. Let us know your thoughts, and hope you enjoyed this podcast, episode 3 of season 2. Until next time, bye.
Bye.